You hear me?
Welcome to the Unique Perspective Show. How are you?
I am great, Baruch Hashem. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. Sorry, we went back and forth a little bit.
Nothing to worry about.
How are you today?
Great. Doing excellent.
So let's jump right in. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boro Park, Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. Okay. What yeshivas did you go to?
I went to Cshan Sopher. I went to Spink. I went to Tarvadas. I went to a lot of yeshivas. You know, there's a long list.
Uh-huh.
Went
I
to
hear.
Denver, Adelphia, Peekskill, Hertzka, Montreal, Rabbi Radinsky, and Muncie.
Wow.
Just to name a few.
So you traveled the world for yeshiva.
Yeah, I was testing out so many different, so many different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is, got to try it out.
Right. So your father, first of all, is an amazing person. Is he the one that actually started Hatzalah? What's his
He was
story?
one of the founders. Rabbi Herschel Weber was the one that had the vision and the dream.
Okay.
And the next contact was with my father, who was already getting familiar with the world of government and politics.
Okay.
And they did it together.
Mm-hmm. So growing up, what was it like for you?
So the joke I tell people is, it's not such a joke, but growing up, in my house, and I love my father dearly, but I always said I would never go into public service, not because I resented what he did. I loved what he did, but it wasn't the type of lifestyle that I really, wanted to have. But I guess God has other plans. I mean, my father is, Baruch Hashem, an amazing person, really, and he's done great work. He still does great work, but in those days, he was the only asking before that word became popular, and it was definitely tough, but it was, enjoyable. So,
was it hard for you growing up with a father that was in public service and not being around that often?
Yeah, it definitely took its toll, and that's why I try to do as much as I can to focus right now on, on trying to balance both. But I fully understand and respect that, back in those days, that wasn't really an option. There weren't enough people doing this type of work.
Right. So fast forward after all those yeshivas and everything, how did you meet your wife, and how long ago was it?
I actually met my wife at Ground Zero on September 11th.
Wow.
I was there volunteering as a Hatzalah member. My wife was an EMT, and she went there to see if anyone can help. And that's actually the first time I met her. It's not when we started dating, but it's the first time I met her.
Okay. So when did you guys start dating, and when did you get married?
Started dating about a year or so later, on and off. My wife is 3 years older than me, so there was a lot of different balances through the process. But we got married in March of 2003. Baruch Hashem.
Okay. And you lived in Brooklyn. Where did you live after you got married?
In Queens, where I've been living ever since.
Okay. Okay, so fast forward, what did you start doing after you got married?
I worked as a paramedic on ambulances. I then went to work. I had a couple of odd jobs here and there. I then went to work in finance for a bit, in real estate. I was trying to, my hope was that I wanted to be rich. That was my goal. Okay. Didn't really work out too well for me, but I tried.
Right. You worked as a paramedic for who?
I worked for Maimonides EMS, working the 911 system. I worked for Transcare, doing transports. It's one of those jobs where you can work in a few different places if you're not doing any one of them specifically full time, which made it much easier for running a schedule when I was newly married.
Right. Well, what was your involvement? I think we crossed paths or whatever with Stromoza. What was your involvement with him?
He was the owner of the Transcare company,
Right.
or it was called Metro Care, I think, when I started working there.
Right.
And I guess, being that I was in Atzalo,
Right.
he was, I guess I would say, good to me as far as making sure that I had the shifts that I needed and,
Right.
other things. So that was, he was very good about that.
Right. So what was your original vision when you started? And what made you decide to start Amudim? And what was your vision originally when you started it?
So I had already been involved in dealing with various different situations before starting Amudim. I
Okay.
was volunteering at Our Place in Brooklyn, which is a drop-in
Okay.
center. And I started noticing a lot of other issues. And then a very, very dear friend of mine, who was involved in helping me with so many different areas of chesed and tzedakah, Laser Shiner,
Right.
had started putting pressure on me to say, you need to just really do something that's going to be organizational. You got to take this to the next level. It's just, you got to really, you got to expand your horizons. And at that point, I
Right.
was helping people as a yachid, as an individual, whether it was
Right.
addiction related, abuse related, the legal system, but I was doing it as an individual. And I kept pushing back, and Laser kept pushing and pushing. And then, the Eibishter Vierte Welt, and I had met, I'd gone to a bris that Moshe Wolfson made for an Anikel.
Okay.
And after the bris, I went over to his house, and, not to go through all the details, but I had
Right.
met Mendy Klein, Oliver Shalom, over there. And we started, we developed a very strong, friendship and relationship. And over the next year or so, realizing a lot of different issues. And then finally, one day, Mendy and Moshe sat me down and said, it's time to do something to make a difference. And, let's go. And that was pretty much when we started Amudim. They pushed me into it, and we just went through the process.
Mm-hmm. And what year was that?
This was in 2014. The initial vision was really to destigmatize sexual abuse within the Frum community.
Right.
To really make it where people can feel comfortable to reach out, to talk to people, to ask, to try to, get help, not to be embarrassed about it. That was the initial, purpose. But very quickly it transformed into people reaching out for help. And then it just grew from there. And now we have, offices in the United States, in Israel. Most of our staff are clinicians, and we now handle cases from sexual abuse, addiction, mental health issues, and we do what we call comprehensive clinical case management. Okay. So even though our staff are therapists, they're not treating the clients. They're managing their care. They're making sure that they're getting the proper treatment, that the family's getting the proper treatment. And the reason why we chose to have therapists do this work is because we felt that if the person is a clinician, it makes it much easier to understand the various issues that are being dealt with and to have a healthier way of trying to assist, as opposed to, not having a better understanding of the field, the industry, and the problems that we face.
Wow. Okay. So all of this started in 2014.
Correct.
Right? So after 5-6 years, back in 2020 we had COVID. Now you're in public service, right? So how did you relate when COVID hit and Amudim? How did that take a big toll for you when COVID hit?
It actually took a huge toll. As a matter of fact, our caseload just on new cases and new clients in 2020 jumped up by, I think, over 600-700 cases more than we had the year before. And it was like another 800 and some odd cases that we opened in 2021 above the year before. But from an organizational perspective, not only did it affect us that way, but we ended up, realizing so many people had so many issues that we launched a support line that was staffed by therapists. A lot of therapists weren't working, so it was good timing. We fielded thousands of calls. So that was one way that we stepped up. We've generated videos, educational videos that, were animations that were amazing,
Right.
in techniques for parents to be able to try to remain calm and collective. During the first Pesach, we set up close to 120 people in various hotels that were closed because of COVID, that were victims of abuse or domestic violence, that just they couldn't be home with their abusers. And Pesach was the first big, event, let's call it. It was going to be a 3-day Yom Tif.
Right.
There's just so much going on. So we ended up setting that up. The UJA was actually very helpful with us in funding that, so that was really great. And we also got Psak Halachas from Reb David Cohen and Rev Katz from Lakewood about people reaching out both to the support line and in general for therapy or for meetings for addiction on Shabbos and Yom Tif, that, which was very powerful because many people in the mental health field or people that are dealing with mental health struggles are embarrassed to ask their Rav for like a Psak Halacha. Am I allowed to call a therapist on a Shabbos, on a Yom Tif? What am I allowed to do?
Right.
And because of the fact that they put out that video, thousands of people have been able to feel comfortable to reach out for help, not necessarily just for Amudim, but just in the concept of understanding that mental health is dinei nefashos. And just like people will call Hatzalah when they have an emergency, people will, be able to call their mental health professional or a crisis hotline or a texting line, for dealing with emergencies. So that was like, I would say the silver lining. But overall, we had to continue balancing what we were doing. And then, as you mentioned, from the public service side, because of other relationships that we had with government and with the Israeli consulates and other things, we started assisting people in times of bereavement and in death. People that lost family members needed to get paperwork to get to Eretz Yisrael, to get the Nifter to Eretz Yisrael. And somehow that just took on a life of its own. We ended up hiring additional staff. There was actually a specific donor that sponsored it that was just focused on dealing with issues of Levias and Mesim. And then from there, it expanded even more into visas, entry permits, student visas. We worked very closely with Rabbi Nehemiah Malinowitz and setting up programs for students to get the yeshivas and the seminaries to be able to be open. So that was not what I call Amudim proper. And people very often have said, why did you mix into that? I said, listen, we weren't looking for it. It fell into our lap. It fell into our lap from a whole Siyata Dishmaya story. But the fact is, during COVID, everybody had an achrayus to step up and to do what they can do. The same reason why we opened up our support line. Now, yes, that is more along the lines of mental health issues. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, no matter how you slice it, we had the ability to do something. We had the relationships to do it, and we did it. And then we closed down afterwards, meaning we didn't keep doing those things. It wasn't like we're not in the business of travel, but so that's how COVID really impacted us. But it also helped us, help a lot more people in many other ways.
What was the Siyata Dishmaya story that happened?
So in one of my other hats, I am a chaplain with the Port Authority Police. And there was a nifter that was being flown by private jet to Eretz Yisrael from Westchester Airport, just when the airports were closing and everything was shutting down. And Westchester was ground zero at that point for COVID, New Rochelle. And the airport police basically said, you're not flying, you can't leave, you don't have the proper papers. And they were threatened at one point to arrest the Chevra Kadisha. So they reached out to me as a Port Authority chaplain. And I said to them, Westchester Airport is not part of Port Authority. So not much I can do. But long story short, they said, no, you got to try anyway. So I ended up going down there and I spoke to the police, and then I had to get the governor's office, which Baruch Hashem did help at that point, and then the commissioner of health. And we ended up getting everything arranged where this nifter was able to be taken for Kfura Eretz Yisrael. And then the next day, another funeral home called me saying, hey, can you help us with this? And I didn't ask them, why are you calling me? But I had just done it the night before. So now I was already familiar with what the process needed to be. And this just grew like one to the other, and it just spiraled from there till it became so overwhelming that I couldn't do it anymore. It was just very difficult. And I was talking to one of my donors, just mentioning it, and it turns out that one of the first few niftarim was his father-in-law, which I had no idea. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to cover. Is it a money thing? Is it a pressure time thing? I said, listen, I don't have the staff for it. We're getting a lot more busy with Amudim work.
Right.
And he says, are you going to be able to handle it if we give you money to hire staff?
Okay.
And I said, yes, but they have to know it's a temporary job in Mirz Hashem, you know?
Right.
And then another one of our staff members, who is very involved in dealing with a lot of the Narcan trainings and the awareness events. So he now didn't have much work to do, you know, because we weren't doing. So we put him also into that area.
Okay.
And then we ended up with David Kushner, who works for Amudim, and then we hired somebody, Ushi Lieber, and the two of them basically were running the entire travel-related component. So that was how we fell into it. So we weren't looking for it, but once it found us, we felt that, you know, we had an achrayus to do what we can to help.
Right. How does someone become a Port Authority chaplain? That's very unique.
I mean, there are, you know, a bunch of us. You know, I had smicha. I was already getting involved as a liaison with the NYPD. My father, Stark, was a chaplain with the Port Authority for many, many years.
Okay.
I had become close to some of the commissioners just over time, you know, from the Port Authority itself. And they were looking at that point for a chaplain that was near, you know, they tried revamping the program at that point where they would have chaplains located in strategic areas near different Port Authority properties. So I was in Queens, in between. I live smack in between, you know, LaGuardia Airport and Kennedy Airport.
Right.
So it just, you know, I got a call one day. Would you be interested? And you know, and that just went from there.
Wow. So the whole COVID thing. Did you see a lot more? I don't want to say it, but like suicide attempts because
we saw a lot more attempts. We saw a lot more suicides, a lot more overdoses. Addiction had jumped right back up to where it was before. I mean, it was just so, you know, like it literally just went, you know, all over. And that was it. You know, we needed to step up and do what we needed to do. But that was probably the biggest issue that we had at that point was, you know, the way the numbers, you know, just really increased tremendously over COVID. I mean, some of the other issues that we started seeing a lot more again of was the, you know, the opioid pandemic. It was really coming. It was really starting to come on the way down. You know, it was really, and then all of a sudden it jumped back up again. I mean, I will tell you a lot of the issues we had at that time then got converted. Like, you know, before COVID, people that died of overdoses or suicides that the community didn't want to talk about. So a lot of people would say that it was an aneurysm or this or that. You know, post COVID, during COVID and post COVID, now everybody was dying of COVID. So, you know, the community was still doing, you know, what they wanted to do. And that was that. You know, we'll take it from there. So
is it because the schools were closed? What was it because of that you saw that big jump?
So again, in the alcoholism, it was a lot of parents that were home with their kids, just a lot of, you know, in regular, it was people that just weren't, people that were in recovery, that were, you know, sober for a while. They just were stuck at home again. A lot of their pressures came back. There was just so many variables that just, you know, people just couldn't hack it. And then with abuse, there were so many victims that were literally stuck in the same house as their abusers. So between all these variables, you know, these are things that, you know, just happen. So.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. And do you see it coming down now more, that since COVID was officially over, do you see it coming down more?
I mean, so the answer is yes and no. In other words, in some areas, we do see it coming down more, in some areas not. You know, there's still a lot of after effects. One of the things that we mentioned to a lot of people when COVID was really starting to pick up is we really need to remember what happened by Hurricane Sandy or by Superstorm Sandy, which was everybody was so busy focusing on the houses and the floods, which again was very important, that people neglected at that point to really see the mental health effect.
Okay.
And I was very, very nervous that this would be the same thing with COVID. And I actually spoke about this multiple times to people.
Yeah.
Where I said, we really have to be very, very, very smart, because this is something that if we don't deal with this correctly, it is going to, come back with a fury like we've seen in previous times.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people, were like, again, and we're dealing with so many other areas of COVID, again, important areas that needed to be dealt with, that it was like it became, again, a problem. And it was like, what are we supposed to do now? So a lot of that is still being affected. I mean, we have kids that we were dealing with that, looking back now, it's like they were so, things were so off because of not being in school, that a lot of the mental health issues that they had as a result of this are still in effect. And that's the problem.
Right. Wow. I did say in the beginning to someone in the beginning of COVID, I did say that post-COVID, there's going to be a lot of people that will need mental health therapy because of all the schools being closed and being stuck at home.
Also, there was so many of these. It was really like, again, I'm not, it was really, really tough. That I can tell you. It was really, really tough, and it's still really tough. I mean, there's still a lot of people that are dealing with the after effects, and right. It's really not easy.
Do you guys still get calls for after effects, or meaning like till this day, do you get calls regarding
Absolutely
regarding COVID issues, meaning
100%
stuff like that?
100%. We are definitely still getting a lot of calls. And this is a big part of the process, but we, again, we got to just keep doing what we do. And that's what it boils down to.
Right. Wow. So that's that. But the real thing is again, you're in public service, but like the travel visas and all that. How did it get to you? Besides the New Rochelle thing,
that was it. That was it.
Just that. It was just that.
It started from that, and then we understood the system, which was tricky in its own right. And once we understood the system, it was like it was like something that it just made sense at that point. So that was that.
And you're still doing it?
No, not so much right now.
Mm-hmm. So your focus is currently now on
absolutely
back on Amudim.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So are you part of Hatzalah? Are you?
I am also a volunteer in Hatzalah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I hear. Wow. So how do you juggle everything? How do you juggle all that you do on a daily basis? It must be very, very hard for you.
So I could tell you that really it's not that hard, because I am truly, truly blessed with an amazing, amazing staff, I must tell you.
Okay.
So that is something that really, I mean, the staff really, I mean, they're make my life so much easier. And if not for them, then yeah, that would be a problem.
Right. And I guess, so a couple of months ago, there was an article that came out. I think it was a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago. An article came out about Maimonides Hospital. And someone said, I think it was about your father, your father, Hashem, who was still living within the hospital and left the hospital. Is that true? What happened in Maimonides? And if yes, how could that be fixed?
Is what true? I'm not understanding your question.
Meaning there were many politics in Maimonides Hospital. I think it was a couple
It
months
wasn't a
ago.
question of politics. My father was a patient there,
Right.
and he, there was no air conditioning, just a post-surgery,
Okay.
and it was just a major problem. That's
Right.
it.
No, I understand. It was just that, but people said that they blamed it on the hospital
Uh,
management.
I mean, who else? Listen, I run an organization, right? If somebody's
Yeah.
not happy with something that
Right.
one of my staff does, whose fault is it? Mine or my employees? No matter how you slice it, it's mine,
It's yours.
because that's the way it works in the real world.
Right.
So the answer is, I mean, in this case specifically, the hospital knew about the air conditioning issue long before, and
Okay.
they did nothing about it. So, no matter how you slice that, it was their fault. But here it was even worse, because I had reached out to them to tell them what was going on. And they were like, yeah, we're sending someone, we'll fix it, and nothing happened.
Okay.
So, when this was in fact the way things, turned out, and then I reached out to them, I was like, I don't understand you. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, here we're, I'm trying to, to get my father help. So I went and I put out a video about it.
Right.
And instead of them stepping up and doing something, they came down and started threatening me. So this
Wow.
was, this took everything that was going on and made it 10 times worse.
Wow. 10 times
So,
worse than
in other words, if they would have just come and said, I'm sorry, we made a mistake, right?
Right. Okay.
So that's one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
If they would have said, we're going to do the best we can to try to help because of other things, it's another
Right.
part of it.
Right.
Here, all they did was like turn it around on me and make it like, like I'm doing something, even more wrong. And I was like, what did I do? I tried getting help from you.
Right.
You guys didn't want to help me.
Okay.
And what do you want me to do now? Like, this is just ridiculous. So by them threatening me, that just really took it up to like a whole new level. And that's when I got upset. And that's when I went to the media, and people were accusing me that I was getting paid to do it. And this, I mean, listen, people can say whatever they want.
Right.
But the reality is, this is what happened. I believe I read an article someplace that said that they were, they were doing things again now. And that they were installing better air conditioning. If that's the case, I'm very happy. But the fact that they started threatening me and saying, we're going to throw you out, and they called security to come to the room, like,
Wow.
all because I took a video of showing how I was sweating and how my father was sweating as a
Right.
patient. It's just, instead of coming in and saying we apologize, they just
Right.
doubled down, and it was just disgusting. That I can tell
Wow.
you.
Wow. So where is Amudim's headquarters now?
Our offices are in Lower Manhattan.
Mhm.
That's where we are based.
Okay.
And Baruch Hashem, this is where we've been, since since we started. We've been in this office, and we have people in other locations. We have in Florida, we have in St. Louis, we have in Cleveland, we have office in Israel, we have a clinic in Israel. So Baruch Hashem, we were trying to do what we can to help people, but people come to us for help from wherever. We don't limit it. We don't, people don't come to us. People call us literally from all over the world, and we will do what we can to assist.
Do you personally travel to the offices? Like, do you travel to Israel, to St. Louis?
I travel a lot. Yes, I travel very often.
How do you balance that and family? Meaning traveling and being home in time to be with your family. How do you balance that
So
aspect?
first of all, I try very hard not to travel over Shabbos.
Okay.
That's the first thing. Okay.
Okay.
And so I'm home for Shabbos, and when we do have to travel someplace where like there's an event or something that we need to be at or whatever, then we always try to take one of our children with us, so it becomes a it becomes more of a thing, instead of it just being, what we're doing, it becomes more of it's a nicer, that we're doing it because we're all in this together, and that's how it works.
Right.
So if I take a different kid each time to a different event, then at least they feel more excited about going to it,
right.
instead of resenting it. And then they start, the kids start arguing like, oh, I want to go to this one. I want to go to that event. I want to go to the Sower conference. I want to go to this one. And we do what we can to appease them and to get everybody on the same page.
Wow.
That's it. That's pretty much what it is.
That's actually very, very like interesting that you try to take your kids along to different places on this. So
Absolutely.
they must, I mean, I don't know if they love it, but they must have a good time on each place that you go to. They're getting to go on a little vacation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why we do it that way.
Right. Wow. And so where can people find more out about Amudim?
They can go to
Amudim.
Amudim.org. That's the best way.
Amudim.org. Wow. And everything is, it's people can donate there, or?
Yeah, absolutely. People can donate. They can reach out for help. They can contact us. I mean, this is why we do what we do. So absolutely, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think Amudim does a great job and great stuff. And helping out the whole clown, pretty amazing.
We try. It's not always easy, but we got to do what we have to do.
Any interesting stories that happened that you can say?
I mean, all of our stories are interesting, but they usually involve other people's pain and sorrows. So it's just a question of trying to get a difference of opinion. And when we have cases where somebody finds out that somebody was abused, we're just trying to get people to understand that we got to try to provide them with the help that they need, and not try to hush them and try to cover it up. But yeah, these are all different, different things that we have to deal with on a regular basis. I mean, just this week, we had somebody whose child was unfortunately abused, and they went and they got, as soon as they actually went to the police on their own. Like, I only got a call afterwards where they said, this and this happened, and this and this happened, and now the Rabbanim are coming to us and starting up with us, and I needed to go down and meet with the Rabbanim that were literally harassing this family, just to explain to them what it is when somebody's a victim and why they need to be supported. We need to support the victims. We don't have, so these are constant issues, so these are things that we always address, and we will keep addressing it, Hashem, until we don't need to anymore. And that's really the hope.
What do the Rabbanim say when someone comes to them and says something like that I've been abused? What do they say?
So the truth is, and I have to be very careful, I don't want this to come out like in a negative to the Rabbanim, because really it's usually just a lack of knowledge and understanding of what's really 100%. Going on. So very often they just don't understand what abuse is. They don't understand what these things mean. So therefore, they get very concerned about so many different areas where it's like, we have to be careful. The abuser, family, maybe they're lying, and they're not. I don't believe they're doing it from a bad place, but they're doing it from a lack of knowledge. So what I generally do is I use it as an opportunity. I use it as an opportunity to go to the, Rabbanim and to explain it to them, and to, tell them like, hey, this is what's going on, and this is what we got to do. So that's that.
Right. But do the Rabbanim say, do the Rabbanim keep it quiet? Like,
very often, yes.
And they I guess they don't want to get involved, or
So either they don't want to get involved, or they think that it's it's a busha, or it's an embarrassment, or it's a this, or it's a that, and they don't understand. People don't understand what it means to be, that they're, what this does and what abuse does to the victims and to their families, and everything else.
right? Wow. And do you see a lot more of Bunham getting with the times and helping out people that are getting
More and more they're getting there. Yes, absolutely. It's definitely getting much better than it was. Much better.
Hashem. What's your shaykhis with do you have any shaykhis with Aryeh Weiss?
Yeah, he's a very, very good friend of mine. He's a tremendous, Baal Chesed, and we try to do things together to help the tzibur.
Right. Wow. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me interview you. I know you're busy and to take time, I was very thankful. And yeah, Mirz Hashem, you should continue doing the amazing work that you do for the Klal and keep it up, and may we never need Amudim again.
Amen. Thank you very much, and thank you for helping. Creating awareness is a very, very big thing, and being able to address these issues, and by giving us this opportunity, it's extremely helpful. So I got to say thank you for that, because that's really an important piece over here.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your
You
day.
too. Hatzlacha. All the
Hatzlacha.
best. Kol tov. Bye.
Kol tov.
Bye.